Okay, well, welcome everybody. This is Carl Deershaw, Small Fish Business Coaching, and I'd like to welcome you tonight to this webinar on a quick and useful business plan. The reason why I put this together is because a lot of us have run into business plans which are not quick nor potentially useful, and I wanted to sort of allay some of the fears on that and give you a method which is actually, in my experience, a very useful way to approach this. Quite useful. We've got a lot of background noise if you want to put yourself on mute for the moment. Okay. So why do we want to create business plans? This is just sort of the big picture. Two big categories. One, for others. And for other people, you might want to get a bank loan or attract investors or be talking to partners about supporting you, things like that. Depending on what kind of people is, they have various needs for wanting to see evidence from you that the business is run well, that you have all the problems solved and things like that. Especially if you want to get a bank loan, some people kid that you provide all this evidence to show how you have everything solved and you don't need a bank loan. And then when you've convinced them of that, then you don't need their money anymore, then they'll give it to you. So, but that's not really true. But they do typically require an awful lot of evidence and support and logic and documentation. That's not what I'm talking about tonight. What I'm talking about is the second one is reasons why you might want a business plan. So you might be wanting to capture the big decisions, to prioritize what you're doing. If you've got employees and folks that work closely with you, to get them aligned so that everybody is on the same page working towards the same objective. So what I've come up with are 5 categories that are most useful when you're creating a business plan that is going to be valuable for you and your team. It consists of 5 categories. Why do we exist? What do we do? How do we do it? Who does what? And how do we manage it? How do we go through each of these in sequence so that you can get a sense for what it's about and how complicated it might be? First one, let's take an example. We're going to help Jack start up a lemonade stand. So he's got his little idea in his mind here, and what would a business plan look for Jack? Because it's pretty simple, but it actually has quite a few categories that you might not expect. So why do we exist? Well, I would think part of Jack's reason for doing this is to have some fun. His parents want him to learn about becoming a little bit more mature, and maybe he wants to make a little bit of money. So maybe that's the reason why Jack wants to start up this idea. So what is he going to do? Well, let's see. He's going to serve lemonade, of course. That's sort of the main attraction here. But let's not forget that part of what he's doing is he's giving to his customers the experience of refreshment. You know, part of that is the product that he is delivering, but part of it is also the experience. And so his service comes into that. If he's smiling and friendly and welcoming and all that, then people are going to come back, they'll tell their friends. If he is not a nice kid and provides lousy service, and people are not going to come back, tell all their friends. So, you know, you've got to look at all of these parts of it. It's not just the product that you're serving here. Okay, so how do we do this? Well, I went and threw together a simple flow chart, but it captures most of the categories that you might think of. On the left side in orange, there's what Jack needs to do to run the business internally. So he needs to obtain his materials. You know, you see the pitchers, the lemonade cup, the table, chair, all this kind of stuff. He needs to mix together the ingredients, and then he's got to manage his inventory. So he's got to be aware that when he's running down, or if the lemonade is too watered down, he needs to go mix some more, stuff like that. On the right side, we've got the customer experience. And so the customer is going through quite a few steps here. So he needs to welcome the customer. They need to give him his order. He needs to take the money. Don't forget about that. He needs to serve them. And then there's part of a goodbye process as well, because you want people to leave happy. And so even if it's simply saying goodbye, that's going to be a part of the experience. Now, you notice here that there's actually some parts of the business that I did not mention, like setting up his little business. So getting the table, setting it up, getting the glasses, stuff like that. Do you give the glasses to the customer, or are they non-recyclable and you need the customer to give them back? Interesting question, but this is good enough for our purposes here. So the fourth part here is who does what. And it's not just about Jack. You'd think that maybe it is, but Mom is going to be somewhere behind the scenes. So she's out there supporting Jack. She's maybe mixing the lemonade, helping him find materials, whatever. Jack is really industrious, and so he went and hired a sign flipper for 25 cents to go out there and stand on the street showing people where the lemonade stand is. So he's very industrious. And then Jack's friends are going to be hanging around because, of course, they want some free lemonade. They're also friends, and so he's going to be him. And perhaps he wants to put them to work. So, if Jack is thorough, he's going to be thinking about all these kinds of things. And then finally, how do we manage the business? I don't know who has all of the noise, but I don't know if I can mute you here. No, it doesn't let me. So he needs to set up the business. He needs to organize it. So that includes, the signage and making sure everybody knows what they're doing. He needs to measure the results. That's probably counting cash, right? And then reviewing the progress. So he's going to be maybe thinking, after sitting there for half an hour and nothing has happened, am I selling the wrong product? Maybe I ought to go back and mix up some Kool-Aid rather than lemonade. Maybe that's what people want. Or maybe people were asking for cookies. Or maybe his friends that he had counted off on have left. They've wandered off. They're not interested anymore, and he needs to adjust his business model. So anyway, this is just kind of a very simplistic walkthrough. What does the business model look like in its most simple form? So let's now translate this to what this would look like in a more realistic context, because I assume that you folks are looking to make something a little bit more complicated than lemonade stand. So we start off with, why do we exist? In the real world, this looks like maybe a vision and mission or purpose, values, things like this. I don't recommend usually to people that they do all four of these. What you do is you do the ones that are most relevant for you. So if you're driven by a vision of the future to say, wow, if I created this business and it succeeds, we are going to have such an improved world, then maybe that vision is what's driving your action in the business. About a purpose for why does this business exist? Is it because of the people? Is it because of the customers we serve? Is it because of the service that we provide? Because we like hanging out with our friends and doing great things. So anyway, it could be any number of these high-level things, but it should capture, why do we exist? And this is more important than you might think, because it helps drive all the rest of the decisions when you're trying to make trade-offs. So the second one is, what do we do? Well, you're going to have your products and your services. So, these are things that typically would show up in your brochure or on a website or things like that. Now, how detailed do you need to get? And the answer is that you need to get detailed enough that you know what you're doing, how it's connected to the why on the previous slide, and all of the people involved can do it consistently. Okay? So if you're delivering products and you have a supply chain, you've got to be able to communicate up the supply chain what it is that you need, and you've got to do that accurately, because if you get the wrong thing, if the quality is terrible or it's the wrong product, then your customers are not going to be satisfied and your business is going to fall apart. The logic is it needs to be as detailed as it needs to be for where you are at the moment. Often it can start out very simple, and then it will get more complex as your business grows and your plan matures. But this is a great way to get started. The next one is, how do we do it? So in the real world, this looks like things like process diagrams, perhaps, step 1, step 2, step 3, flowchart-ish kind of things. Or you could have data flow diagrams. Often I find that tables and pictures are best at describing these kinds of things. Usually, if you're using the written word, it gets too wordy. And it's much easier to explain why things work the way they do in pictorial form. So I'm trying to figure out why Zoom.us just flaked out on me. That was weird. You're still there though, aren't you?
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, other things you might use are interface points. So what transfers from one person to another, or what transfers from one function or company to another. Those are often very critical points. So taking the example again of the supply chain, your interface to the supply chain is going to be a critical part of how your business works. Describe how that works. How do you issue orders to them? How do you handle when things don't go properly? How do you handle customer service issues? How do you handle billing issues? Any number of things like that. And then also, most businesses are not just a single, you create everything out of your head and your hands. There's usually partnerships involved, whether that's your products, whether it's service, marketing, customer support, whatever it is. And so you want to be able to describe how do these partnerships work, because that partnership needs to be a long-term relationship and needs to be stable. You can't just reinvent it every 5 minutes or you're going to drive your partner nuts. So you need to do some planning. If you have any questions, feel free to pop on here. Okay, next, who does what? This typically looks like org charts. Even if you have a one-person business, you still have functions that you're performing. For instance, I'm basically a one-person coaching business, but I still have my marketing function, my service delivery function, my billing function, things like that. And so I've got to be saying, how many of these things am I doing myself, and how many am I relying on other people for? If I want to rely on a virtual assistant to do my billing, for instance, well, that's an important part of describing who does what. And you may not think of it as an org chart because I'm just a one-person business, but it's a critical function for the business operating properly. The next one is accountability. Um, you got to say, who am I going to hold accountable for what functions? And that's slightly different than responsibility. It especially becomes clear when you've got multiple layers in the organization where the people that do the work are directed by somebody else who actually has the accountability to make the decisions about how the work is done. And so you've got to think about both of these dimensions. But you know, if you're talking about a one-person business, this is usually fairly simple. Uh, this is not going to be a complicated part of the chart for you. And then finally, how do we manage it? Um, so there's several parts of this because many times we're talking here about a startup business. We've got to say, how do we get from here to operational? Do you need to go out and evaluate suppliers? Do you need to go out and buy a storefront? Do you need to accumulate some inventory? Do you have to build up key skills in order to function? Those sorts of things. But it's the startup process, the startup cost that you need to incur. Um, then after you have things operational, then you look at what is it that we measured, where are our key decision points, and how do we review on a regular basis. And different dimensions are going to have different review cycles. So you might review your revenue on a daily or weekly basis because you're spending so much attention on that and you want to be very responsive to what's going out in the market. However, looking at your partner relationship, maybe that's something you do once a month, and then after it stabilizes, maybe even once a quarter. So that's a key part of looking at how the business is managed. And even if you're a one-person business, this is an important part of what you do. You're going to be required to, say, review your tax situation on a quarterly basis. You'll be required to look at key relationships very, very often as they're in the formation stage until you have high confidence in how things run. So you really do want to look at this. So anyway, this was the 5 parts of the business plan, simple and straightforward. Is anybody out there listening to me? It looks like I have everybody on mute, and I don't know why.
Carl, I'm here. I've been muted.
Okay.
This is Patty.
Okay, so question and answer time. If you have any questions.
Not at the present.
Okay. So what is a plan like this good for? Well, for focusing on the big picture. So it's great when you're, say, evaluating different approaches to your business or evaluating different businesses entirely. I know people who go through, say, the Small Business Development Center class, and one of their tasks is to look at a lot of different kinds of businesses so that you can compare and contrast them. You know, or just looking at different kinds of models, different approaches. Setting priorities. So when you're clear on what it is that's most critical to the business, that helps you to defer some of the other things that are not quite so critical right now. So for instance, let's say that over the course of your first month, you would expect to make 4 sales. Well, you know, that's great. That means that a lot of the paperwork can actually be done by hand, and you can defer some of the purchasing of systems until later because, you know, 4 sales is not a whole lot. You can have direct contact with each and every customer. As a matter of fact, that's probably a part of your plan in the early days. And so that means that other issues about how you hire and empower other people may be not so critical. You can worry about that a little bit later as the business needs that. When you do have multiple people working with you, even if they're partners, getting people aligned and working together is a critical part of it. And the simpler, the better, I've found. You can impress people with a 30-page business plan. They think you're smart. They think you are an incredible planner. But the fact is, very few people have the patience and attention span to read through and understand something like this. You find that people work a lot more and they learn a lot more from direct conversation. And so something like this simplified plan is actually quite conversational. You know, it's something that you would tell somebody if you were sitting across the table from them. It helps give people freedom with their accountability. So when you can tell people you are responsible for these results, go off and do it and tell me if you run into any problems, that gives them a lot more freedom than when you're trying to micromanage their job. So this kind of high-level work really does help. And so even if you have a more mature business, it's useful to have a simplified form like this, you know, kind of a 1-page, 2-page, 3-page kind of view, because that's something that's understandable and consistent. And that's really my last point here, is a plan like this doesn't change rapidly after you get the business going. The details change, you know, and that's the problem with writing a 30-page plan, is that there's constantly details in there that are changing and it drives you nuts. But if you've got something that's 2 or 3 pages, that really is capturing the stuff that tends to be most consistent and stable long term. And that's one of the reasons why it's useful to share with employees and partners, because they are looking for long-term continuity. It drives them nuts when things are changing every 5 minutes. Now, there will be things that do change constantly. Every conversation you have with a customer is going to change what you're learning. Everything you read in the press might change your views about, hey, let's go and try a new marketing approach and see if it works. But that's the kind of detail that typically is not going to show up at this level of simplified business plan. So I believe that's my last slide. Yes, it is. So just to sum up, I'm Carl Deershaw, Small Fish Business Coaching. I'll go ahead and send you the worksheet for this webinar and extend the offer of my free coaching session. But I'd be very interested to now hear what kind of questions you folks have. Are you there, Patty or Anna? Hello? Hello?
Carl, this is Patty. Am I unmuted?
Yes. Okay.
It just took a while for it to get there.
That's weird.
So,
yeah. So do you have any questions?
thank you for the information. What works best for me is if I can digest this a little bit, and then I will write down my questions, and then I can, when we get together, then I can share them with you.
Okay.
I need to then kind of put it to use first, and then I know I'll have questions for you.
Okay, well, I'll send you the worksheet tonight. And basically, it's these 5 sections that I just talked through with some areas to actually write in your ideas for your situation. But it's really simple and straightforward. And I think you're right to see that it's the thought that you put into it that matters. You know, and thought takes time. You know, it takes some introspection and trying to figure out, okay, how would I put this into words? And that's one of the reasons why I always encourage my clients to write these things down, because the process of writing it into words is actually an important part of your decision making. It helps make it clearer for you, and it helps make it clearer for other people.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Okay.
I appreciate your worksheet as well.
Okay. I'll send it straight away. And it looks like Anna may have dropped off. I don't know. Maybe she was having problems. But anyway, thanks so much for showing up tonight. I do appreciate it. Went quickly.